Natalie gave us lots of great tips, and I'd like to hone in on one of the tips that Natalie provided, and that was about credibility and information about self, and sharing that information to let other people know what you do and how you do it and what you're good at. The other thing David just spoke about, storytelling. And really, the purpose of this story that I want you thinking about is you. So the topic of this story is you. And that will all come together to form part of your brand. Now, something to keep in mind, we're only going to, work on this for about 15 minutes, and brand and what I'm going to talk about, strengths, go way beyond 15 minutes. So we're only scratching the surface, but what a great opportunity to scratch the surface. And I want to start with a story because I think we have a heck of a lot to learn from Alice in Wonderland. And I'm not going to read you the whole book. This part of the story goes like this, and it's the Mad Hatter speaking to Alice. And he says to her, "You used to be much muchier before. Yes, you were much more Alice the last time we met. You've lost your muchness." Alice replied, "My muchness?" And the Mad Hatter pointed to her heart and repeated, "Yes, your muchness." So I mentioned that the topic of these 15 minutes is you. And what I'd like to delve into is your muchness. And what I mean by your muchness is what is here. And there's many, many things that make up your core and your positive core. There are many, many things that make up your authentic self. There's your values, there's your beliefs, there's your competencies, there's strengths, and so, so much more. But what we're going to focus on are strengths. Question for you. When I say the word strengths, what comes to mind? Ability?
And experiences, things that bring skills to a situation or to a job.
Okay, so abilities, experience, skills that you bring to a job. Anything different?
Positives.
Tell me more.
I think strengths are perceived to be very positive things.
Absolutely. So the strengths that you bring are positive. Anything to add to that?
Things that you believe yourself you can do.
Okay, so there's an inherent belief that I think I am good at this. Okay, everything you've said, absolutely correct. What I'd like to do is actually add an additional layer to those definitions. And this definition that I'm going to provide to you comes from positive psychology. And Alex Linley, who's a psychologist out of the UK, he talks about strengths are all of those things that you've said. They're your experiences, they're your skills, they're positive, you have an inherent belief in them, and they bring you energy. So you are good at it, you exceed, you excel, you get promoted on them, and they bring you energy. And I want to share his model with you. So a 2x2 matrix, and apparently there's an MBA that is just filled with 2x2 matrices, but that's not what we're here for. Learned behaviours. I'm going to give you a definition here. Learned behaviours are those things that you are good at, you excel in, you exceed expectations, but they do not bring you energy. And I'll share an example with you. I spend my life, as I said earlier, and I'm really fortunate to do this, working with people and helping them to be their best self. Core part of my business is leadership development and teams development. There's another part of my business which is sales skills development. And I am good at it. I exceed expectations. The feedback I get from my clients is great. But do you know, if all I was doing was sales training, I'd rather poke my eyes out with a stick. Don't tell my clients I said that. So I'm still good at it. It's a learned behaviour. I still exceed expectations. But it doesn't bring me energy. Anyone, any examples in the audience of learned behaviours?
It's like teaching students who are not very good, and you're trying to encourage them to do stuff. And it's quite draining.
And I'm going to ask you to hold on to that because that's a really valid point, and I'll loop back to it. Okay.
I think my background as a scientist working in a clinical lab, like I was good at it, I was meticulous, but it was the same over and over. Yeah.
And are you still in that lab now?
No.
Okay, and Do you get energy from your job now?
Different type. To some extent, yes.
Okay. And please don't get me wrong, life has it that we will work with learned behaviours. I still do sales training for a variety of different reasons, but I just don't want it to be, I don't even want it to be 50% of my job. Okay, here we get into the exciting part. Alex Linley talks about realised strengths. Now remember, these are the things you are good at, you exceed, you excel, and they bring you energy. And he calls them realised strengths because you understand that you have them. And you can very confidently share with other people, these are my strengths that bring me energy. Question for you, why would you want to share with others your realised strengths? So you get to do more of them. Who said that? Yes, absolutely. So you get to do more of them. So that when you've got to work with your learned behaviours, you've actually got the energy from your realised strengths to actually put into those learned behaviours, into the tasks, into the projects that require your learned behaviours. Now, don't get me wrong, there's this tension here. I love leadership development, I love teams development, and at the end of a program, I'm tired. But it's a good tired. It's a tired like, bring it on again. I can't wait until I do it again, compared to, if I never had to do that again, it'd be too soon. So it's a different tired. Alex Linley also speaks about unrealised strengths. And these are the things that, or the strengths that for whatever reason, you don't know they exist. And you may not know they exist because you've just never reflected upon them. You may not know they exist because no one's ever given you feedback on them. But if you took the time to reflect and or ask for feedback, you may realise some strengths you didn't know you had. So again, these are those things you excel in, you exceed expectation, and they bring you energy. And then finally, and we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't acknowledge that we all have weaknesses. You know, sometimes we call them areas for development. But, you know, let's call them what they are weaknesses. And they are just those things that we are not good at. Now, keep in mind is that there are some parts of our roles, our jobs, that are a weakness, and we have to do something about them. We can't just say, oh, they're our weakness, so I'm not going to put any effort into them. Because a key part of the role is this particular aspect. So I'm not saying, you know, ignore your weaknesses. I am saying, as best you can, work to your strengths. As best you can. If for whatever reason in the workplace you can't find the opportunity to actually implement your strengths, strongly recommend to find outside of work where you can implement your strengths. Because again, they will give you energy to bring into the workplace. This is what I'm going to ask you to do. So if we think of, you know, branding and credibility and you as your story, I want you to take just a minute to write down 2, 3, 4 words that are based on your strengths. So I want you to identify 2 or 3 strengths that you have that are based on this definition. So those things you are good at, you excel in, you exceed expectation, and bring you energy. Off you go. When you've written down those 2, 3 or 4 strengths, I'd like you to turn to the person beside you and share them. Now, if you happen to know the person beside you, the lovely thing is they can validate those strengths for you and or actually add to those strengths, which may be an unrealised strength. If you don't know the person beside you, I'd like you to share the strengths anyway, because this is part of your branding, part of your storytelling. Here is your first practice at giving your 20-second pitch. Doesn't have to be a sentence, but just those 3 or 4 strengths that you've identified. Okay, I expect to hear a lot of noise. Over to you. Okay, I'm going to ask you to bring your conversations to a close, please. How does it feel sharing your strengths? Good? Okay, I don't accept good, okay, or fine. Tell me something else. How does it feel sharing your strengths? Empowering?
Oh no, it's quite strange because I'm American and we're used to this. But then
Valid point.
yeah, but when I came here, I'm like, I can't say anything I'm good at because then they think I'm, arrogant.
Yeah.
That's true. I think that's uncomfortable.
It might feel a little uncomfortable. So remember, when you're sharing your strengths, think about it from the point of view, this is what I have to offer. This is not about, I'm pretty good, aren't I? Just ask me and I'll tell you. This is about, this is what I have to offer this role, this is what I have to offer this project, this is what I have to offer this committee, board, whatever it might be. And that means that I have things that I can share with you that's not just going to be helpful for me, but it's going to be helpful for us. Any other, how did you feel? Because there was a lot of noise.
I think it was a good reminder to actually think about it,
Yay!
because they're not really things that sit on the top of your head.
No. So a good reminder, think about how often do you reflect and think at the end of a project or walking out of a meeting, what did I do well?
I think you spoke about if we knew the person next to us, they might validate it, but I actually think sometimes hearing it yourself is self-validation, and that's very powerful.
Absolutely. So I encourage you, reflect, think about them, bring them to top of mind and share your strengths. This is how I use this model, and capability and competence are absolutely important. If you think about when you're applying for a role and your CV is put forward, they're looking at your skills, your competency, your experiences that you've had. So they are absolutely important and fundamental. But if you work to strengths, so those things that you're good at and energise you, that's when you're more likely to reach your potential, be your best self and flourish. And when we're flourishing, that's when we're more confident. When we're flourishing, that's when we're more resilient. When we're flourishing, that's when we open ourselves up to opportunities that are out there. So Alex Linley says that you should marshal your realised strengths, and what he means by that is that all of our strengths have a tipping point where they get in the way. So for instance, one of my strengths is authenticity, and sometimes that's got me in trouble. Okay, so marshal your strengths, absolutely work to your strengths, but just keep a check on them that they're not getting in the way. Maximise your unrealised strengths, because if you haven't been using them to their full potential, here's your chance. Minimise your weaknesses, absolutely, and that may be, you may need to develop them into competency. It also may mean if you can delegate. And also moderate your learned behaviours, because life as it is, we do need to moderate our learned behaviours, we do need to use them, more to the point. So, one last piece of advice from Alice to wrap this up. And in fact, you can read that far more quickly than I can say it out loud. But Alice is wondering, I wonder if I've been changed in the night. Let me think, was I the same as when I got up this morning? I almost can remember feeling a little bit different. But if I'm not the same, the next question is, who am I? That's the great puzzle. So your story will change. You will have walked into this auditorium at midday or thereabouts with a story, and 2 hours later your story will have changed a little bit. For some it may have even changed more. But I end with this because I come back to what I said earlier, own who you are. Because when you own what's here, that's when you're going to be your best. Thank you.